I don't think Peter Teschner's here, is he? Peter Teschner? Okay, from Glen Council, he did say he was coming. Inverell Cyclone Tri-Club President Andrew Blake, here to my left. Race Director Scott Sunderland, all the locals know Scott. Ray Griffin, son of the late Jack Griffin's with us from Tamworth. Welcome, Ray. And we have a previous winner of the race in Don Australia, the 1970 winner. As I look around, where are you, Donny? There, sorry. Hi, welcome to you. Look, what I'm going, and also Inverell Cyclone Tri members as well, thanks for coming today. I'm just going to go through our sponsors to let you know the work that's been done over the last few months and the sponsorship that's come from local businesses and national. A-grade this year will be sponsored by McDonald's, Inverell and Grafton. Chris Rogers is with us from McDonald's, been a tremendous partner for many years, and so thanks Chris for your continued sponsorship of A-grade. The A-grade Kick in the Mountain sponsored by Scody. The A-grade Sprint sponsored by BKO Truss and Frames. Greg Burgess is company, and his son Blake is one of the 4 people on the organising committee. The B-grade Skybridge Financial, welcome to Jason and Tom, thanks for your support. B-grade Sprints, Dan and Kylie Wilkes from David Reed Holmes, thanks Dan. Dan's here and he's bought his push bike too, he's that keen. The B-grade King of the Mountain sponsored by Highland Cycles and Sports Power. Dave Medalia was coming, he may still be on his way. C-grade this year, the Inverell RSM Club, thanks to Tim Palmer for their support. And the RSM Club not only sponsor our C-grade section, but also do run the dinner for us each and every year. This year, unfortunately, because of a prior booking, the dinner will have to be moved to the Holy Trinity, but the RSM Club said that's no problem, we'll still cater, and so this year the dinner will be held at the Holy Trinity. C-grade King of the Mountain sponsored by Michael and Kate Jorgensen Builders, and C-grade Sprints sponsored by McIntyre Hot Bread. Susan Tyson from Coca-Cola Ambertell, thank you for your support. Susan's come back as part of the well-known local Tysers family. We approached Coca-Cola for support this year and they said we certainly will do that, so thank you Susan for that. Also our supporting sponsors, Best Employment, Scotty Saunders is with us. Bindery Beef, Amcal Pharmacy, Bolio Rum, New England Subaru, Christie's Plumbing and Septic, Australia Engineering, Don's here, Inverell Coaches, Paul's here, Print Anything, Mark McNeil's here, Paul Howard, who's a private sponsor, as well as WM Printing, and our 3 councils being Inverell Shire, Glen Severn, and also Clarence Valley. I'll say more about them later on. The organising committee for the Grafton this year consists of a subcommittee of the Inverell Cyclone Tri-Club, Peter Sunderland, who is not with us today, he has another commitment, Blake Burgess, who as I speak is in Grafton with the Roads and Maritime Services and the police on a debriefing for this year's event. Andrew Blake to my left, and myself make up the subcommittee with input from our race director, Scott Sunderland, and we co-opt other people as we go along. Also want to mention a fellow by the name of Chris Thompson from Cycle Sense. Now Chris is based in Queensland, he's come on board. He does a lot of the logistical work for us these days. He's a cycling aficionado and he's taken a lot of pressure off the committee as well. And it's great that the Grafton Cycling Club has also in the last couple of years come on board and more than picked up their share of the work on that end of the race, because it is a massive, massive job. I never realised the extent of it. We want to thank the police and the Roads and Maritime Services too, because without their permission we just don't run the race. I'd like to ask Andrew Blake, our Inverell Cyclone Tri President, to say a few words. Andrew.
Good morning everyone. On behalf of the race committee, I'd like to thank you all for your time to be here this morning. Planning for this year's race to be held on Saturday the 26th of October has been underway now for several months, as Greg's explained. Greg's furnished me with a little bit of history for the event. The Grafton Inverell, it started in 1961 and the winner that year was Alan Grindle. 63 cyclists started in that first event, but only 17 finished. I don't think I could imagine how hard those 142 miles were, with the majority of it being gravel. It was gravel from near Man River, some 40 kilometres out of Grafton. It was bitumen up the Gibraltar Range, so it's approximately an 18-kilometre climb, but gravel again from there to within about 15 miles of Glen Innes. So quite an arduous course. It was that way, I think, for 5 years, Greg? Approximately 5 years it was. No? 4? 2, 3. In 1979, the race changed from a handicap to a mass start, and this was to bring it more in line with international races. Then in the following year, 1980, we had many international teams to compete. And if you have a look at the honour roll, which I think is pinned up, it's actually on the coffee table there, you'll see many teams from Great Britain, Norway, Italy, New Zealand, the United States, Uruguay, as well as the 5 Australian states and territories. The crowning glory of the race was in 2010 when over 400 entries were received for the 50th edition. For those not involved in cycling, make no mistake, the Grafton to Inverell cycle race is the event that virtually every cyclist on the eastern seaboard wants to ride. A small percentage of riders enter to win, to place, to be competitive within the race, but the vast majority just train to enter, to just finish. In its history, there have been many instances of Inverell people watching the finish. They get inspired, they train for the following year, their mission just to ride across the finish line. For many, they never start the race again. I would like to extend a big thank you to the sponsors and supporters and volunteers that Greg has just mentioned. It takes many spokes in this wheel to make this event the success it is. We hope in some way the communities of Inverell and Glennis and Grafton derive some benefit. Earlier in the week, Phil Ayres, the Chief Executive Officer of Cycling New South Wales, contacted us with his apology. He sent the following message that he would like to have been read out. Cycling New South Wales is looking forward to another fantastic instalment this year with the event as part of the National Road Series. Professional riders looking to step up onto the fully Pro Tour teams will saddle up for the race as an important part of their career journey. We also pay tribute to the hard work and dedication of the organising committee from the Inverell Cycle and Tri Club, as well as the support from a host of corporate supports and local councils, the New South Wales Police Force, and many volunteers on the day. That was from Phil Ayres from Cycling New South Wales. In conclusion, I would like to extend my thanks to the organising committee for their persistence and commitment in preparing the 53rd edition of the event, and I'm sure it will be another success. Thank you.
We're delighted to have Scott Sunderland as our race director this year. Scott, I think most of you know, is a local man who did all his junior racing and training around the roads of Inverell. He was an elite Australian road champion, went on to Europe and rode at the top level over there. He's now very much involved in management consultancy. He's a race director for the Subaru National Road Series, and I think it was only a natural fit that when we extended the invitation to Scott to become our race director this year that he would accept. So I'd like Scott to come forward to say a few words and outline just a couple of changes to this year's Grafton Inverell. Scott.
Thanks, Greg. Welcome everybody, great to see you, great turnout. Fantastic race we're going to have again this year. It's been around for a few years, so I think most of you know how it all runs, the format, etc. So I won't go into great details. As Greg mentioned, we've only got a couple of little things we've changed. We've reduced the number of hill climbs this year, back to four, purely to try and to streamline and keep the flow going within the race itself, so the riders can just concentrate about racing each other instead of looking at all the points along the way. We've got a new change in Glen Ennis, you can see on the map there for the feed zone. Instead of coming into the Glen Ennis and going to the park and turning left up via around the railway, we're going to be turning right and going around the back of the parklands this way. A few different things, the reasons behind that is purely because of the what we call it, heavy transport deviation around Glen Ennis, so that we can streamline that a little bit more for them, for the traffic management planning. Talk about the NRS race. NRS is growing rapidly. Cycling Australia have been trying to promote this. As a federation, we've actually started up a commercial events organisation within Cycling Australia. This commercial events has started doing not just road racing, but women's road racing, track racing and mountain biking. The next events they're looking at going into will be BMX. So they want to promote and run events on a greater, higher level, on a far more professional level going forward. This is great for the Grafton Inverell as well. As the Subaru has been a big backer of these events, it's great, creating a lot more national exposure and publicity, and also looking at promoting the NRS races and developing the NRS races to, as I mentioned before, a ground for the younger riders to then show themselves and then hopefully being picked up and go on to the World Tour events and Tour de France. But I think it's going to be a great race for the NRS. That I have no doubt we're going to probably have more riders and more teams competing this year than we have done before, so it's going to be very exciting, as was last year. The other big change, we're going to have B and C grade starting together this year. Also due to cost, we're going to put them together. We can have less police, which is a big cost for us every year. So they'll be starting at 15 minutes behind A grade and starting together, but there'll be still separate race results. They'll just be starting together. That's the other change that we have there. We're looking at about 100 plus riders for the NRS and somewhere in the vicinity of 200, potentially 200 plus riders for B and C grade together. So it's going to be a great big bunch as they head in towards the bottom of Gibraltar. I've no doubt they're going to spread out as they go over the mountain. But it's going to be some spectacle definitely for the start. I want to thank Inverell Shire, Severn Shire and Clarence Valley Shire for their support, because without these three shires this race will be happening. We just seen yesterday that the Goulburn to Sydney race has been cancelled. And this is due to highway, traffic management planning and police costs. They just couldn't come to an agreement to find a solution. This race has been running since 1902, so it's the oldest running race in New South Wales, and it's a big, big pity that we've lost that race. We don't want that to happen with the Grafton Inverell race, and it's with your support as shires and sponsors that we can make sure that our race will keep continuing for the 54th and so on. We're now on our 53rd, is that correct? Lost count myself.
That's right.
But no, it's going to be a great event, and we look forward to having you all out there, and thank you very much.
Should have mentioned, for those who don't know, Scott ran third in the Grafton Inverell years ago in a three-man sprint, remember it? Yeah.
7 men. We've got the Kiwis in here.
Them Kiwis didn't get it. Folks, all of you would know the name Jack Griffin. Jack passed away earlier this year. His name was synonymous with the Grafton Inverell, either as a rider, I think he rode certainly the first one in 1961. He then promoted the race for so many years, and then became a spectator when he moved to Port Macquarie. Jack unfortunately passed away earlier this year. We have his son Ray with us from the Tamworth area. Ray's got the bug back, cycling again. He looks lean and fit. I'd like him to come forward to say a few words, and also I suppose unveil a very special shield.
Thanks very much, Greg, and thanks for the invitation from the committee to be part of today's launch. My father lived and breathed this race, and you had to live in his house to know how much he lived and breathed the race. It was his life from about January each year through to October when the race was over. He would be quite upset that he couldn't make it this year for lots of reasons, but he really adored this race, and it was part of his annual calendar to be a spectator after he stepped down as the race director in the early 90s. My father talked about two things that resonated with me over the years. One of which, some of you will have heard the story, was that he could always remember climbing the Gibraltar Range in 1961 and hearing a baby screaming in the back of the car that was looking after him, and he spoke about that being me, and I was getting better fed than what he was, he reckoned. The other thing that always sticks in my mind is that, and Andrew talked about 1979 when the race was made a mass start. When my father and the late Malcolm Campbell decided to change the race to a mass start in 1979, they were almost vilified for making that decision. But they had a vision, and the vision was that this race should be run on the same basis as European races is. And their dream was realised in that it's become the number one, the hardest one-day race in Australia. He talked about at one stage that he met Shane Bannon in the World Championships, Track Championships in Perth, back in the late 90s. And Shane Bannon is now the Director Sportif, or the General Manager, I should say, for Orica Green Edge. Shane went up to Dad and said, "I want to thank you." And Dad said, "What for?" He said, "For making Australian road cycling what it is today. Because without your vision to make it into a mass start race, we wouldn't have all these wonderful mass start races now in Australia." Scott talked about the National Road Series racing. That's mass start racing, and it's been a great success. And so that decision in 1979, as controversial as what it was for my father, I think it certainly made the race what it is today and led to other types of racing, other races taking on that type of racing style. I'm very honoured to be able to show you today the plaque which Cycling New South Wales has commissioned, and it's the Jack Griffin Memorial Shield, which lists every winner of the race since 1961, and this will be presented to the winner at the finish in Otho Street, and also again that evening at the dinner. My father would be extremely touched by the fact that his name is being remembered in this way and will be for a very long time. I just wish he could be here with us. Thank you very much.
That shield each year will have a permanent home here at the Inverell RSM Club, thanks to Tim and the board for agreeing to that. At this point I want to mention 2NZ. Jerry's here, John Shaw's here. This race started in 1961, as Scott mentioned, and that very year I think I was yay high, maybe yay a bit higher. Listening to the broadcast, it was a lot different than that. No need to laugh at that. Listening to the broadcast of how they did in those days was, the line is Terry Harkins, the late Terry Harkins, would be based in a studio in Glen Innes with Gordon Turner from Armidale. They would have county council fellows in the two-way vehicles. One would go to Grafton. He would radio the riders who didn't turn up for the event to a fellow at the bottom of the range. He would then drive to the top of the range and then radio that to Terry Harkins. The race coverage wasn't what you get today insofar as its running commentary, but it was reports every hour, on the hour, sometimes more than that, until they got near to the finish, and then they take the coverage live. It was an interesting way they did it, and it was a brilliant coverage, really. And that coverage has evolved over the years to what it is today, thanks to 2NZ. And I often think back, without the radio coverage, how the race would still evolve or still run, but it certainly would not have the publicity or the impact that it has today. So I think we take it for granted, I'm sure we do, but I think a special mention always should be thought of with 2NZ for the work they do. And of course the Inverell Times with their coverage before and after, where we really do need the media support all the time. I'd like to call on Paul Harmon to come forward. Now Paul is the Mayor of Inverell and also the Chairman of the Sapphire City Festival Committee. Paul has ridden this race. How many times, Paul?
Started 3 times and finished once.
That's a pretty fair effort. A lot start 3 times and don't finish at all. So Paul has an affinity with cycling, his whole family of course, and we'd like you to launch this year's race, Paul.
Thank you, Greg, and good morning everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this morning to officially launch this year's Grafton Inverell Cycle Classic as part of the Sapphire City Festival. Andrew, to you and your team for the organising committee, I know it's no small task, and to all the sponsors who've come on board to participate as well, because I know without sponsorship support, something like this event certainly couldn't take place. As Greg alluded to, I'm a cyclist at heart. I've been cycling since I was probably about 11 or 12, and exactly what you alluded to before, and saying with Ray, that once you've got cycling in your blood, it never gets out of your system. And I remember years ago, the cycle club used to actually have races prior to the riders actually coming into town, and I participated in those and thought one day I'd love to actually be able to ride this race, and it took a few years to actually get there to actually ride it. But it certainly is one of those iconic events of cycling in Australia, and certainly it goes down as the hardest one-day cycle race in Australia, and certainly without Jack's vision and all those in those early days, it certainly wouldn't be the race that it is today. And I certainly remember, Ray, the controversy when it changed to a mass start, and then the influx of international teams that came to Inverell to participate. It certainly was something quite new. As we know, cycling, its profile in Australia is lifting and getting ever stronger, but certainly for a lot of years, if you didn't play football or you didn't play soccer, you certainly didn't get much coverage, or it wasn't sort of talked about. And I know the profile in cycling in Australia certainly lifted. And as was mentioned before, Inverell Shire is a proud sponsor of the event, and we certainly recognise the importance that this event brings to Inverell and its wider community, with not only with the influx of the tourists that come to town, but also the coverage that it gets throughout New South Wales. And certainly, as with my festival hat on, I know we realise certainly how important it is to the festival. And certainly this year we've extended the festival so that we actually can have, we're not clashing with the finish of the Grafton Inverell in regards to our finale weekend. So we've extended the festival to 3 weeks so that we can actually try and share the crowd rather than sort of like in the past we were competing for the crowd. So certainly this year we hope that there's a large presence at the finish line for this year's race. I know the 50th anniversary, there's a massive crowd there, and it was fantastic. We certainly hope that there's going to be a good crowd at this year's finish. But certainly thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'd like to officially say congratulations and launch this year's Grafton Inverell Cycle Classic.
Thanks, Paul. Just on, before we finish, a couple of things. Just on the magnitude of preparation for this race, as part of the traffic management plan, a leaflet has to go in every roadside mailbox between Inverell and Grafton to alert the occupiers of that land and that property that there is a bike race on. There'll be a rolling road closure on the day. That is the onus put on the committee. So that's just one little thing that you have to do. I think last year one of our young fellows rode his motorbike to Grafton and stopped at every mailbox. You think of the size of that task. This year, the Grafton Club's going to do from Grafton to the top of the range. The Glen Innes Club will do from Glen to the top of the range to help us out. We'll do to Glen. That's just one little part job that we have to fulfil as part of our traffic management plan. We have a few cyclists here today. I think a couple are going to go in the race. First of all, Dan, you going to ride the race?
Yeah.
B grade twice. Second? Twice?
Second, yeah.
Yeah, Dan Wilkes, one of our riders, brought his bike today. He's that keen. And I think the only other I don't know is Simon and Sam. You going in it? You're going in it?
Yeah.
I understand. What, C grade, B grade?
B grade.
Elite men? B grade, well, and Ryan Thomas, I'm going to mention Ryan because Ryan's a junior at the present time, although I think he might come out about October sometime. Ryan will attempt his first Grafton to Inverell at the age of? 18. I think the plan is his coach will get him to ride to the top of the hill and then probably just pull out or see how he's going and then prepare for next year, which has happened before. You see a lot of fellas do it. They'll just try to see how they're going with the idea next year is the year they're really after. So good luck to Dan, Sam, and also to Ryan. I think there's probably half a dozen locals going in it. SBS will cover the race, and the film will be on Cycling Central about a week and a half, Scotty?
The week later, the following weekend, yeah.
Following weekend.
There'll be highlights of that on the Sunday evening,
Yeah.
and then there'll be a full package on it the weekend after.
Okay, so that's Cycling Central's